everybody, this is Chris Schmidt from Rocket Lasso, and we are continuing the training series for the RKT Field Driver Bundle. And this time we're going to start talking about the modifier layers. Specifically, this time we're going to be talking about weight, the modifier rocket weight. So in this case, we're going to create some sort of animation. So I've got this sphere, and I'm thinking it's going to do a whole bunch of motion. Maybe it's a little bit smaller. And we're going to right-click and drive via extensions a field driver. Holding down Alt, it'll create a random noise for me automatically. I'll pull that out, and I would like to, this time, drive the position, not the color. Hitting play, we should have this sphere wiggling around, doing its thing. I would like it to move quite a bit, so I'm going to copy the 200 down and invert it, so now you can see it's moving around quite a bit. And with the rocket noise, I can increase the bias, and this is now zipping around, doing its thing. Happy little sphere. Now, I would like to start making a series of copies of this sphere. So I'm thinking, maybe should we get a little fancier? I might do something like put this noise inside a group, just in case we want to make any changes to it. So let's make a group field. So a vanilla group field here. And inside that group field, I'll drop in our noise. And just to maintain the visual, I'll drop that inside of this group as well. So that just means I can group additional things in there and everything gets linked nice and clean. So we've got this noise still wiggling around. You still see we get the 3 different values. So now I'm going to make a duplicate of my sphere. So now I've got 2 spheres. What I'd like to do is have a second sphere chasing the first one. How can we do that? Well, I'm going to, inside of the field, add a new modifier, not inside of the group, but on top of it. And that is going to be the rocket weight tag. When I create that, it's going to make a weight tag after it, and it's very simple. It's got one primary property, and it is offset. And you can now see that we have a second sphere chasing after the first, doing exactly the same thing, literally exactly the same thing, just 3 frames later. So let's duplicate it again. This duplicate, I will say wait 6 frames, and we'll do it again. Copy another. This time I'll say you are going to wait 9 frames. We can keep making more copies there. Let's do 12, and we'll do one last one and say that one should be 15. So just by modifying that offset, you can see that all of those are following exactly behind. This is behaving a lot like something like the delay or the decay. It is taking the previous value, but in this case, it's taking the previous value and just returning it a certain number of frames later. So it's going to enable these types of effects. And it's a very kind of mechanical modifier, but it opens up a lot of really cool opportunities. Now, the way I happened to set this one up means that all of the values can propagate through. So if I go back into this group field and make any changes, or you can go back up to this master one with the original group, I can make changes to my original noise, make this one a little bit faster maybe, have those zip around quicker, and you see all the other ones immediately catch up and start doing the same thing. Change the noise to a different type. Let's do what's a weird one? What's mod noise going to do? I don't even know. Oh yeah, mod noise just pops around. That's a terrible one. Let's do Naki again. So it zips around nice and snaky, but also kind of has a nice pop to it. So yeah, all of those layering up excellently, but we can also do things like say, okay, but I want to put some stop motion in there, and it's going to be modified by stop motion. And I'll say update every 10 frames. And then let's put in a delay. And I'll put that after the stop motion with some smoothing. And now you can see we're doing a series of straight lines, each of them lagging a little bit behind. So it's just a way of taking any field, making it do something a little bit later than the thing it's referencing. So mechanically speaking, very simple. Now let's move into a slightly fancier scene file. Jumping over here, I have got a whole deformed plane. So this is just a deformer I made. It's a plane with some random noise. We could go and modify that however I like. I click it up or down, change the way that is laying out. Let's drop that down. And so now I'd like to add a vertex map onto our connect object here. So right clicking on it, I will say other tag, vertex map. If you've never used vertex maps, they're very powerful. They've gotten so much more powerful because of fields inside of Cinema. So there's a field list here, and we can feed it anything we like, and I will feed it this spherical field. I've already got prepped in the corner, and you can now see that that is highlighted in yellow. A vertex map is assigning values onto every point of an object, and red means 0%, and yellow means 100%, and all the oranges are in between values. So now that little corner has some values. So that's the first vertex map, and we'll just call this one vertex map start. Now, I don't want it to just remain like that. So in this vertex map, I will say I want to add a classic freeze field. So I'm going to say freeze, set this mode to grow, and then set my radius to 22 and my effect strength to 22. I'm not going to spend a lot of time explaining every single detail here, but this is going to make it spread out. Each point that has a value is spreading out to its neighbors up to 22, and it's applying an effect strength of 22. So it's kind of faded as it travels. So if I hit play right now, it's going to grow all the way across. Essentially, it's infecting the entire thing, which is really cool. So now I will duplicate that field. So the exact same copy, this time deleting out those fields, and I just want to drag the first one into it. Let's rename this one. It's always very important to rename your vertex maps. So this one will be called vertex map weight. So what's this one going to do? Well, in this one, in the fields, I'm going to say, yes, you've got the same vertex map as the first one. You're just taking in the information from the first vertex map. And we can even be really literal. I'm going to say, base it off the index. So like 0.100, whatever its value is, if it's 55, it's transferring 55 to the other 0.100. So direct transfer. So now I will create a new weight. And the weight, I'll just say, I want you to wait, I don't know how much, let's say 10 frames. So now if I hit play, that is now animating across the entire thing. But if I select the original one, you're going to see it's further ahead. That's because this one is now waiting 10 frames for the value. Every single individual value is being stored. Now, we do have another setting in here, which is pretty cool, called indexed. If I turn that on and we give it a decent amount of variation, what it's going to do is actually weight different amounts as it travels. So you can see we get this kind of fun infected leading edge because each value is weighting a different length of time. So that's just kind of a cool detail, but not super applicable right now to this one. So now we've got one vertex map, which is traveling across, kind of infecting the entire thing very quickly, and another one that's identical, but lagging 10 frames behind. So now that we've done that, let's make a third vertex map. So with this third one, I will say, I don't want the weight or the vertex map. And instead, I'll rename it to combine. So this vertex map is combining the two. And how do I want to combine them? Well, I want to take the very first vertex map, which is the one that goes ahead, and then drag in the second vertex map, and that's the one that lags behind. And now I can click on them and see the exact results. So with this in the third one, I'm going to say I want to take the one that's lagging behind and I want to subtract it from the first one. And you now see we get this ring. So by kind of doing this feedback loop on top of itself, I can get this kind of infection bleeding edge traveling across the entire thing. So that's actually working very nicely for our purposes. I think what I'd like to do is maybe make the initial growth a little bit slower. So let's go to the freeze, and I want to make it a little harder edge. So I'm going to jump this up to 50%, and that might grow faster. Let's see. 50%, yeah, that grows faster. So I'm going to make my radius a little bit smaller. So let that grow. There we go. About the same original speed, but it's a little bit harsher on the edge. This one automatically updates because we linked to it. And then this one automatically updates, and you see get this nice harsh ring. And now we can change the thickness of that ring just by changing that single weight modifier. So if I say only wait 5 frames, then now on this one, when we let it play through, we're going to see a very thin ring traveling across it. If we tell that to wait for only, let's say, 2 frames, that's getting a little bit tight, but let's see what that looks like. Hit play, let that travel across, and yeah, look at that, with just this really thin ring. Now, actually, inside of this map, we could twirl these down and see everything that makes them up. So, that can be handy for quickly modifying this. Now, we could change this a little bit more. Maybe I can increase a contrast to that. My classic way of doing that would be to do something like make a curve, and this is remapping the values, and I'll just crank these up. So it's kind of like, okay, that's pretty much full power very quickly. If I do this, you see any part that has any value is going to get mapped up higher. So I'll do something like that, and I think that looks pretty good. And now that we've got this little ring, I would like to have that section catch on fire. So I've already got my pyro set up here, and we'll just clear that out. And I've got a whole bunch of specific pyro settings here. It's not super important for this setup, but for the most part, I'm just spitting out some temperature, and I'm also spitting out some fuel on there. Now, do I want this to be everywhere? No, I want it to only be on this emission map. So let's drag in our combined vertex map and enable the tag. And now with those two things combined, let's look at our vertex map and hit play. And now with any luck, it's initializing the fire, and now we've got a wave of fire that's traveling straight across the entire thing. So look at that burn just based on that vertex map. And that's all just thanks to that weight being added on there, letting it travel straight across. I think there's actually just a little bit of value there, so I might clamp that out a little bit. So inside this map, I might say, okay, anything outside that curve, like really sharply drop down. Or actually, I might even change, instead of this curve, I might just make it full power. So if we say quantize that, I can drop this down to 0, and now it's just black or white. So it's full power or not. So now if I play, we shouldn't get that little smoke leading edge. And now we just get this nice fire burning straight across that ring. Now, as always, we can always go back and just modify the original object. So in this case, I can say, hey, I'd like to let that wait a little bit longer. So let's say it's a little bit bigger, maybe even twice as big. So it'll be twice as thick. So let that play. Yeah, look, a lot more fire because the ring is thicker. But things like our freeze can be fed other values like this radius. So if I were to feed through this random field, and if I actually, let's drag in that random field so you can see it very clearly. This is that random field here. So you see there's kind of modified values everywhere around it. If I drag that into this radius, then now it is going to say that the spread radius, and if we click on the freeze, this radius here is going to be smaller or larger. So let's just turn off that fire and see how that has changed this. So on the vertex map, just by adding in that little bit of random field, if I hit play, you can see that the infection is going to have a lot more. Look at this more like kind of like interesting shape that it's taking on, just because there's a little more variation on it. And then just for fun, I can activate a little bit more geometry here. This is all you see inside this connect right now. The reason I put in this connect and modify the connect is I could add extra geometry in. So if I start this over, it's still infected from that same original spot. Actually, we need to start it over again. This is something that happens with vertex maps. Click on this first one, and then the freeze, just say clear. So it's going to reset it. And now in the freeze, say add. So now it's going to view the spherical field again. And what was happening before is it was remembering the original values. And when I just changed the indexes by adding the toruses, it updated. So that's just classic vertex map stuff. But now with our added weight, we've got this infected, spreading out with the freeze. And now we've got some extra geometry just for fun. So if we look at just the vertex map, let me grab this one. You just got this kind of wave of vertex map, and you can actually see it's going to jump onto that bit of geometry just by adding it in. It's going to burn across. Those two bits will meet. It travels all the way through. So, looking so good. So now let's go back into our pyro, reactivate that, start our animation again from scratch, and watch the fire spread all the way across this thing. So all these licks of flames traveling across. You see it's going to burn on there. It's going to look at all the extra variation on the surface, and it's now going to go up that pipe. So yeah, like so much control, and using the weight tag, it's a very simple way of getting this nice bleeding edge on the entire thing. So again, a very fun combination to add onto the field setups, just being able to add on like more kind of technical math. You can do more rigs. Now I've actually got one more example to show when it comes to weight. Let's jump over here and you see a very, very simple scene. We just got a couple of old motexts, and we're going to drop in a plane effector. I want to set up some animation here. So this plane effector, yeah, it's going to push it up in the air. I like the look of that. Let's push up a little bit more. Let's add some rotation and maybe spin them around a little bit extra. And yeah, we'll modify the color as well. So that's a plane effector. Let's move inside the fields, limit it so it's not everywhere with a plane. And now I can pass this through, and you see essentially these are going to appear left to right. So I can increase this length, push this as far over as I want. So I think I'm going to start the animation over here and just do some simple keyframes. We could also use a field driver for this. And you know what? Why not? Let's use a field driver. So we are driving the X position. So I will right click on our linear field, add a brand new field driver. I do want this timer. I want it to take, let's say 90 frames, and I don't want it to loop. So let's set it to once. So at the beginning, it's already at the position I kind of want it to be at the start. So let's drive this X position, drop that on, and we'll say at the time of 0, where do I want this to be? I want it to be sitting right about there. And then we'll fast forward at the end when it should be completed at frame 90 and say at this time, I want this to be living right about there. Excellent. So now if I scrub through, you can see it's automatically timed out for me, and I don't have to worry about that anymore. So we hit play and it just animates in. Excellent. So, nice, simple animation that is transitioning in. And you know what? Let's even go back to the plane and have this also be affected by the scale. So I'll say scale, uniform, and should we just say -1? So it's going to be really tiny. There we go. So now it's scaling in, plopping down into position, and it's working just fine. You know what? It might be smart to put this plane effector into a group field. Those are pretty powerful. So let's say I want a group field, and inside of that, I'd like to drag the linear field. So any changes we make here will propagate through the system. We'll say colors and set that all to normal. Okay, so now in this field, I want a duplicate of this one. So I'm going to say duplicate that plane field. And I don't want all that stuff coming on for the ride. I'll just link the group field again. So now let's make sure that this field is actually under the letters seeing the second effector. So you can see it's doing the exact same thing at the exact same time. And that's where wait comes in. I want that to happen later. So all I have to do is go inside this plane and say, I would like to wait. How long do I want to wait? Let's say 15 frames. So now you can see that that is coming in later. Let's say a whole second later at 30. So now you can see it's going to wait a while before it comes in. So we do the exact same process again. Let's duplicate this below driver. And under driver, I'll say under the letters, I want to drive it with this. And you can see that it's going to get the exact same animation at the same time, but we'll say this time to wait 60 frames. And now that will wait as well. So that comes in, and then this comes in. And all of that is happening just thanks to a single linear field traveling across. We'll give ourselves a couple extra frames here just because I didn't have enough time to finish. And now all of them are completing. We can go back to the original group field and make any changes that we like. So inside of here, we could maybe add in a little bit of delay. Actually, if we want to go fancy, I'll make another stop motion, drop that inside the linear field and say update every 10 frames. And then put a delay on top of that. And we'll say to smoothly transition there. And you can see pop, pop, pop. Or you say spring, and then these should spring into position. Bing, 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 bing. So those all layer up really nicely, all thanks to just that one thing passing through, but these waiting a little bit of extra time. So, very, very clean controls, very, very clean layout here. Now, of course, we could be driving any properties we like. We've got all these plane effectors. Those could also be driving color, potentially. So we could say, yes, that is driving color. So go back to the original group field, and this linear field could be outputting some color to it. So currently that is outputting this color, but of course that's the modified color, not the base color. So I think that'll look a lot better if we were to modify it with a gradient, and now we can ramp it through. So the dark color is where it's going to end, so we can feed through any kind of gradient there that we want. Let's go through and load in something that's going to stand out a little bit. Let's grab Coolish 2. So now you see it's going to start out in this kind of neon color, and it's going to fade into these purple colors. So yeah, once again, easily delaying those along. And we can remap any value we like. There's so many different things we can control with this. So anyway, I think that's going to cover everything I want to talk about when it comes to our lovely rocket wait tag that we can actually be affecting all of these colors. Actually, I didn't turn colors on for the second modifiers. So that's kind of important. So yeah, now those will actually wait as well. So yeah, I love the way that this works in conjunction with the other modifiers especially. So yeah, 3 different examples, and that I think is going to wrap this one up. Thanks, everybody. I'll see you in the next one.